According to Barna, 64% of Christians today think that evangelism is optional. Let's change the stats.
Welcome to GoCast, a podcast designed to inspire and equip pastors and leaders to lead soul-winning churches. We have a mission to go and make disciples. This is GoCast.
Hey everyone, welcome to GoCast. I'm your host, Kelly Stickle, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Tim Tribble. How are you, Tim?
Doing great today.
Awesome. Well, today we have on the podcast Pastor Danny and Nathan Green, and it's a fascinating conversation. The conversation's about a 15-year plan that they put into place 10 years ago. They're 10 years into the plan, and it is working so far perfectly. About a 15-year plan for succession, which I found fascinating because I think one of the greatest needs coming up, I'm having this conversation everywhere with pastors and leaders. Articles are being written how the next big crisis in the American church is going to be this whole idea of succession, that there's mega church pastors all over the place who in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be retiring with no real plan of succession. And here are these guys, and they got 15 years. They had a 15-year plan. So let me ask you a question. Okay. What are you going to be doing in the next 15 years? What's your 15-year plan?
Kelly, I can't plan anywhere past 15 minutes from now. I don't know how they do. Like, this kind of thing requires diligence. It requires a vision from the start, and it requires a commitment, not just on one person, but on both. Yeah,
well, just the idea is impressive. When I first heard that, I was like, wow, just the idea of having a 15-year succession plan. I thought, okay, that's fascinating. But I think what's even more impressive is that they are doing it. Yeah. They're 10 years in. They're actually a little bit ahead of schedule.
Walking it out.
And so we have this amazing conversation with them on what that plan was, what it looks like, how they're implementing it. And it's fascinating. Every leader has to listen to this, whether you are about to retire or are just, you need to have a plan 15 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now. Fascinating conversation with Pastor Danny and Nathan Green of Skybreak Church in College Station, Texas. Well, welcome, Pastor Danny and Nathan Green. Welcome to GoCast. It's such a pleasure to have you guys on the program today.
Awesome. Great to be here.
Man, I'm so excited to get to talk about this topic. We're going to talk about succession a bit, and I'm excited to talk about this because I think this is so needed and a great discussion. And you guys got a plan that we're gonna hear about that I think is just extraordinary. So let's just back this up a little bit so everybody can become familiar with you guys and what's going on. So Pastor Dan, you founded Skybreak Church in College Station, Texas, in 1987, correct?
Yes, May of 1987. We rolled into town. Not a real strategy, didn't have ARC back then and other opportunities. We just came in with a passion to try to build a church. We had 1 3-year-old son at the time.
Wow.
Everything we owned was in the back of a truck. We rented a building. I was in a denomination. We started having church.
That's amazing. And university town, so I mean, that comes with its own unique challenges as well. So that's exciting. So I mean, the church had humble beginnings, but is now a church of thousands. So talk to us a little bit about the church and how it's grown over the years.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I mean, we're humbled by what God is doing, and but seeing hundreds of people now every week gather in our services, and we went through a lot of learning curves in 32 years, and I know after about 8 years of being in the denomination, we had about 100 people. We were here 8 years, and I'm like, there's got to be more. Loved my heritage, loved my background, but felt like, so I have no stones to throw regarding that. It just felt like they were stuck, and I didn't know where we were going to go, but I knew there had to be something different. And so we found out there's a really big world out here, and there's a lot of hurting people that want to know Jesus. And so we're great now. You see scores of people every week, every color, every background, every age, every race walk through our doors every weekend, and it's just rewarding. So thank God for that.
That's awesome. And I mean, Skybreak is a soul-winning church. It's an outward focused church. You're going after the lost, and I love it. And lots of salvations, and it's exciting. So, okay, I got to ask this, Nathan. Growing up as a PK, what was it like?
I think more than anything, hindsight in it, I didn't see it maybe quite like this, but I would say it was definitely a privilege. The word that I would probably use, and this is maybe just ministry in general, it's brutal.
I mean, there's a brutal side to it, but there's also a beautiful side. And so the brutal side of knowing that the whole glass house mentality, we probably many PKs have said, or we've heard the phrase of, I would say it's true. You know, you got the people that are watching you. You're the kid, you're the PK, so you should be acting a certain way. But then there's the beautiful side of it, where at least I had accountability growing up, and people were looking out for me. We had the extra moms in the church, you know, that could spank you just like your parents would, you know. So things like that. So I would say it was brutal. You had the ministry side of it, but you also had the ministry side of it, if that makes sense. So getting to do things that maybe people didn't get to do, go places that people didn't get to go. I mean, he was my dad. He was also my pastor, so I had full access as a pastor, you know.
Yeah.
And then growing up, now where I am now, still a PK, he's also my boss, and he's also my friend, and he's also my mentor. So learning all of that dynamic was definitely, it was a journey, but it was very enjoyable.
That's very cool. And it's obviously been more beautiful than brutal, because here you are, 30 years old, and you're on staff and in church, and that is, you can't always say that about a lot of PKs that go through that. So congratulations to both of you on that. All right, so Pastor Danny, let's get to it. All right, so you told me something a little while ago. We were in conversation, and it absolutely blew my mind. You said that about 10 years ago, you set out with a 15-year succession plan. I've never heard of that, and I was and am very, very impressed with that idea. So talk to us about why you felt it was important to plan that far ahead, and in particular your burden to focus on succession in the prime of your ministry career. I mean, this is 10 years ago. You had lots of years left in ministry, but yet this was a focus and on your heart to plan that far ahead. So talk to us about that.
Kelly, the big picture is my dad is 82 today, and was a pastor for many years. I'm the oldest of 4 sons, and all my brothers have been in ministry and pastors.
Wow.
And so from a front row seat, I've watched a generation ahead of us, in my opinion, didn't know how to transition well. And so their pulpit was their identity. And so I told Janet, when I was 49, I'm 59 today, I was rolling into my 50th birthday, I said, we got to get this right, and we're going to start right now. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I think we got 15 years to make the journey. So we're going to start, and I don't want it to be drastic. I want it to be smooth. And so I felt like it's like 3 5-year windows. And I can't say this is a real well thought out strategy, but there's going to be 5 years of training that we need to do. Really just be intentional about training. Don't assume anything. Then there's going to be a second 5 years of us doing this together. You're going to do it. I'm going to do it. We're going to do this together, hand in hand. And then there's going to be 5 years of affirmation, 5 years just showing support, being on the front row, and like, go, go, go. You're the man. And let the church see me support the new leader 100%, not just, hey, here's the church, and then I'm gone. So we didn't know how that was going to look, right? I mean, that's just kind of our strategy. And so, so here we are. That we were on this journey, and right now, the best example I would say that what we've used and what really made it clear for me how we're going to do this, the best example to look at was a relay, right? I ran a 440 relay in high school as a number 3 runner of a 440 one lap relay. So I had to run that third leg of the race, but just the whole idea of a relay and the passing of the baton, and there's an exchange zone, and you got to hand it off within that period of time, and the person with the baton has to make sure he gets it to the guy in front of him. It's not the guy in front of him's responsibility to take it. It's my job to get it to him, but he does have to be prepared to receive it, right?
Right.
And he's got to be moving. He can't be static. He's got to be on the go too. So just to speed forward a minute, Nathan and I right now, we both have our hand on the baton. I would say that was very clear. Right. And we'll talk about some more details of that. But I just think that this generation before me didn't know how to do this. And I told Janet, we're going to do this. We're going to take a slow pace, but we're going to be very intentional. And we'll just play this out by ear and see because there's no really good examples I don't find in the scripture.
Yeah.
I mean, you got fathers and sons, but you got Eli and his sons, and that didn't work out so good. And you know what I mean? Now you start looking at examples, and I mean, Paul had his proteges. I get that, Timothy and so on. But how do you transition the church? You know, I mean, I've been here 32 years, of course. So I did run across a verse of scripture in Numbers in my daily reading a few weeks ago, and it's Numbers 8:23 through 25, and I just want to mention it because I've never read it before. It says this is what pertains to the Levites. From 25 years old and above, one may enter and perform the service in the work of the tabernacle of meeting, but at the age of 50 years, they must cease from performing this work and shall work no more. They may minister with their brethren in the tabernacle meeting to attend to needs, but they themselves shall do no work. So
wow.
I'd never read that before.
Yeah, I never caught that either. That's amazing.
And I get that that's Old Testament, but there's reason. These things aren't in the scripture by accident. Right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so I read it to my wife. She goes, "Oh, that's amazing." And I'm like, and you can study that. And there's some background and all that. But I just thought it really helped me. I'm like, dude, at 50, that's what I was saying. We got to make a change. And yes, it in some people's eyes. And thank you for saying it. You know, you're in the stride of your ministry. I'm 59. I mean, I know more today than I've ever known, and I know what not to do more than I've ever known.
Yeah.
At the same time, man, a guy in his 30s, the energy, the vision, the passion, the drive, how can we harness all of that together? So that's where we are right now.
I think it's really, I really like the analogy of the relay race, because I mean, one thing about the relay race is that the exchange doesn't happen when the runner's tired. Right, the runner with the baton. I mean, it doesn't happen when he's tired and slowing down. It happens at full speed, and we can't wait to pass on that baton when we're exhausted, we're done, we're tired, and you hand it off. Then, I mean, you have to start at the pace at which you receive the baton, and so I think your plan is absolutely amazing. So 15-year plan. The first 5 years is training. Talk to us about the training. What did that look like?
Okay, and so I've written some things down, and I'll see how I'll jump through all of this, but I really felt like that Nate, and we have an older son named Jared, and we're going to talk about that dynamic as well, because at the early stages, I got two sons in ministry, both full-time, different gifts, different strengths, and they're trying to find their footing, trying to figure out what lane they need to run in, who are they called to be, right?
Right.
And so, but I started exposing my sons to the inner workings of the church. Business meetings and planning and strategy, and they needed to start owning that rather than just saying, well, you're staff and I'm going to make all these decisions and then you just carry out the decisions. I wanted them a part of the decision making process. Right. I started including them. This is where the beautiful part comes in, and I think it's important people realize that we sheltered our kids when they were small from things they didn't need to know, but as they got older, it's like, okay, this is the real lot. People have real problems.
Yeah.
We have real problems. And we're going to work through these together, and we're going to help people. And here's how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it was maybe that sounds simplistic, but business, church meetings we were having, behind the scenes finance meetings, making plans, going. I'm like, I want to take you to meet the bankers. I want you to know the attorneys. I want you to know these people. I'd see them in public maybe. I'd call them over. I want to introduce my sons to you. And so we just started trying to include them those first 5 years. So making sure they knew what it takes to build the church. It's not just what Dad and Mom have decided.
And just so our listeners are aware, so in that first 5 years, that's what you guys built a facility in that same time. Is that right?
So it would have 5 years ago, it would have been the second 5-year window we built this facility. In that first 5 years, we built a second campus. So they were that strategy.
Okay.
And but when we built this building, yes, they were making as many decisions about building this building as I was.
Yeah, wow.
Job about really teaching the value of the whole shadow experience, like the whole Elijah and Elisha experience, where you showed me, and maybe I learned this just at a younger age than some, but the value of the shadow experience is so underrated, and I think unnoticed by so many young leaders that they don't realize the value in just being in the presence, being in the room, watching how they act, how they handle confrontation, how they speak from a pulpit or from the moment that they're counseling somebody. So I think part of the training that I got was just a matter of just following around and watching, not like a lost puppy, but yet just understanding meetings and systems and structures and ways of thinking, and how do you actually pastor people in the world we live in today. And so that was something that I think was a part of the whole training that I got out of.
Wow. So Nathan, you're 20 years old. I mean, this started, right? So you're in your early 20s and you're sitting in on business meetings, and you're sitting, I mean, talk to me about that experience. I mean, you're sitting in on meetings that, I mean, were you attentive that time? Like, how did, I mean, did you want to weigh in? I mean, how did that work?
When you got married, and then you went to Sydney for a year.
So when I was 20 years old, I got married, and 3 weeks later moved to Australia to go to college. My wife and I did. And when I came back after a year, part of the story of my mom's journey, we came back after a year not knowing what her future would look like and her cancer journey. But I wouldn't say it's right at 21 years old when I got back was it necessarily that I was jumping into business meetings. I still was. I walked into doing youth ministry not knowing what the heck I was doing. I was surprised he let me walk in at 21 years old with 1 year of actual college experience in this. But I think over the course of time, me learning out of my own experiences and failures, figuring things out, but then slowly over the course of a few years, you slowly begin to bring me into things, business meetings. And it was about, 2 or 3 years ago that we actually got a part of our corporate side of things. So wasn't a whole lot of information at first, because wanted to make sure that there's a value in that and understanding that and making sure my heart was right and ready to be able to handle some sort of information that most people would never be able to see or hear.
Wow.
Yeah. So Kelly, they would hear us making decisions. So Mom, Janet and I talking about, okay, we need to make this decision, how we're going to do that. I didn't shelter. I wanted them to hear all of that.
Right.
And then Nathan to develop his preaching skills. So youth ministry was a great place for him to develop his pulpit skills and teaching every week, developing a sermon, finding his voice. We've heard that language used.
Yep.
But yeah, he didn't need to be me. He needed to be him, right? So all that happened in those first 5 years, and then even beyond that. That's kind of what was going on during that journey.
Okay, so then talk to us about the transition into the second 5 years. All right, so what began to shift, and how did the second 5 years look? And you're just at the tail end of that, right?
Yeah, so, and I use the 5 year window. That's kind of vacillated a little bit. It's not like a hard number or a hard date. And to segue into that, people might need to understand my situation personally, as you do, Kelly, a little bit, where my wife's journey with battling cancer for so long, the last 9 years, 9.5 almost, have been really challenging for her. So during this whole journey, we've had that going on, which it has actually caused me to even push forward quicker or more intentional, because I've not been able to be at the office. I've had to attend to Janet with her journey and chemotherapy and treatments and so on and so forth. But what it's done is it's caused if you'll give young people a chance to stand up and lead, they will.
Yeah.
And so the John Maxwell example, I do, you watch, you do, I watch, we do, then you do. I mean, right? And that's kind of really just where we've been.
Yeah.
But the shift really happened at the first of this year, 2019. So Nate began to preach more on the weekends, but basically he began to be a part of our strategy, our series. But prior to 2019, you were doing maybe 5 or 6 weekends a year, give or take.
Yeah, more a lot behind the scenes.
But he was leading staff. Now, you've been leading staff for probably 3 years now. Mm-hmm. So the daily staff, I started handing off the staff first. And there's a whole conversation about the team that I built versus now the team. He has to build his own team. The team that followed me, some of them are not here. Some of them are. Most of them aren't, because they were loyal to me. But there's been only a few that okay, I'm going to be the same loyalty to me.
Right.
So I wanted that to happen first, if we could go back before the actual stage. So we've been building the team, and he's been working and establishing his leadership with our core. And then in 2019, the preaching schedule, I'm doing 22 weekends this year. Nate's doing 20.
Yeah.
So there was a major shift this year where we just put the brakes on it and put the gas on him. He had a new baby born in January. I'm like, okay, welcome. Here's your third child. 20 weekends a year you go be preaching. You got the whole staff in your lap. I use it like a sports term. You got to get your legs.
Yeah.
There's something you do, Kelly. We do as we've been in ministry longer that you do in rhythm, and you don't even know you're doing it. You get
that's so true.
Well, when the new guy's coming along, he's having to take those loads on, right? But he's got to get his legs for that. So we've just been little by little by little just letting that happen. I think that's where time is your friend, to let them learn that, to be able to adjust on how you're going to manage family and staff, and manage your money and small kids, and up at night with a baby, and yet you got to prepare for a sermon, but you got to
that morning.
You know what it's all about. You got a house full, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So when you've made this statement before, and this was in the early years of part of this transition, was a high tide rises all boats, and so whether you rise or not is according to where your capacity is going to be. And so as things were shifting and as things were elevating and moving, my personality is I'm an owner, and so I don't want to just work here, but I want to be an owner. But my actual motive, a lot of things, is I want to be a part. So as things would shift or change, or things would be needing to be led, I would just jump to I just felt the need. So I would just jump on it, start doing things. And he goes, hey, by the way, that's added to your title now, or that's added to your responsibility. And so things like that begin to shift. And that was part of my learning experience, is learning to take on more things, and stretching my capacity, my growth, my leadership, what God is calling me to do. So that whole dynamic of all that taking place, and even between us, with decisions being made, especially in the season we're in now with this, we're doing this together. It's a dynamic because of my mom's journey, and more time for my dad to be at home with my mom and taking care of her, and because every day's different, seasons change.
Yep.
So some days are really great, some weeks are really great, even months are really great, and then you may go on a time when it's not so great. So making big decisions, there's some things that we may butt heads on, like, oh, I see it this way, or I see it this way, and we have to kind of work through some of that. But then, obviously, at the end of the day, we both know we want the same thing. We just may see it from a different angle. And so it was very far and few between, though, that any of that really takes place. And if it does, our personalities, we do think quite a bit alike. So it's not too far off. I may just see it from a little bit different perspective, or from a younger generation perspective, and or vice versa. And so I think it's been a pretty awesome dynamic. And some things I'm just like, hey, I want to own this. Can I have it? And he'll say, go for it. And then some of it's like, no, I want my hand on it still, because here's why. And so we work together. And I think that's, in this season right now, that's both hands on the baton. I feel like that's really where we've learned to build a stride together in making decisions, and me learning and us having healthy conversations. I think that's a key, is we stay on we communicate every other day.
Yeah, we're talking.
And I want to do my best as the leading second, or the younger generation, or the successor, is to make sure that I'm in constant communication, because he's not in the office every day. I am.
Yeah.
And so there's conversations, there's decisions being made, there's confrontations and structures being changed, or whatever the case may be. I know that in order for me to keep him updated, is the utmost valuable to him, so he doesn't feel out of the loop, or I'm leaving him behind, or leaving him out because I'm trying to hide something, or whatever the case may be. So I had to be intentional, and that's something that I don't know if I picked it up from him from a young age, or if that's just something that was in me. But I communicate with him on a constant basis on, hey, here's what's going on. Probably more than he would rather hear, because he's like, okay, thanks. And then that may be the end of the conversation. But the fact is, he knows that I am wanting to keep him involved, and there's no intention of me to try to push him out, because that's not the season. That's not what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so let's get to some of the nitty gritties now. Okay, so I mean, how do you, Pastor Danny, like you're handing the baton off? I'm sure. I mean, there's things that you just naturally do that Nathan's not. You just experience. I mean, just experience alone is going to, or he's going to do something different that you don't necessarily agree with. or he's making a decision that you're not sure about, these kind of things. So what have you had to do differently as a leader to make this work?
To get right to the nitty-gritty, Kelly, you got to get your ego out off the shelf and put it. You got to get rid of your ego as a senior leader.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, boy, my mind's running 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Something Brian Houston said years ago that really helped me. He didn't say it to me. He was just saying it to, I don't even remember the setting. But he said, I don't want just experience, because experience is a box. And experience is proven. We know what it'll do, but we don't know what it'll do beyond that. Steve got out of the box. He didn't stick with experience. He went beyond experience and created another experience. Right. And now we all carry them around called iPhones, right?
Yeah.
So the beautiful thing about collaboration is there's things I know, but there's things he knows. There's things I'm passionate about, but there's things he has strength and passion about. When we collaborate together, we get the best of both worlds. Yeah. There's things he's willing to risk at 30 that at 59, I'm like, I don't want to risk that.
Yeah, yeah.
I would stop the church if I let my ego get in the way and say, but I'm the senior leader. I'm 60 years old almost. But I don't want to do that. So I got to get my ego off the shelf. I got to get, you know what I mean? I got to, I got to get all that aside and realize he's gonna knock it out of the park, and I got to celebrate the wins with him and not be afraid to share the glory of leading. Because someone else said to me one time, they said, do you miss preaching today? Nathan was preaching. I said, I am preaching. Where do you think the echo of the voice came from?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's me. It's his own voice, but he's the echo of Janet and I.
Yeah.
We produced him. God gave us him. God gave him to us through us.
Right.
So when you see it through those eyes, where my strength and his strength together, I think it's so important. And then as a leader, I had things I had to do different and start changing my language, and I did that with our staff. Even this year, in our staff day recently, no one knew I was going to do this on that particular day. He didn't know. My wife didn't know. And it wasn't like it was a big thing, but it was a big announcement, but it was a big announcement. I just said, as of today, I want you to staff to know that I'm moving into a position of senior pastor, and Pastor Nate is moving into a position of lead pastor. That's going to be the language that we will have from here on out. That when you see me, I want you to start seeing me as a senior pastor, and I want you to start seeing Pastor Nate as a lead pastor. So when he says something to you, when he gives you instruction as a staff, and we were meeting with staff and key leaders and staff spouses, so we have to start there, right? I'm like, if he says something to you, it's as if I'm saying it. Listen to him. So that's the groundwork we have laid, I think, Kelly, to just release and give authority, and then me sit on the front row and be the first one clapping, the first one standing when he is speaking and exhorting and leading.
You've been very intentional about the next gen concept. So our church is very big on reaching the next generation, but you've also been very, very adamant about it is our duty, our responsibility to lay up an inheritance, a legacy for our next gen. Not just an inheritance, that's what you're going to leave them with, but a legacy of what are you going to leave in them, not just physical leave them with. So I think he's done a really great job of steering the ship of our church being next gen and legacy minded. And he'll say it all the time. In 10 years, it will change everything. Right. So my son, who's 6 years old, will be 16. Oh my God, I can't even imagine him driving. He's 6 years old. And so in 10 years, it changes everything. So he's been very, I think, intentional about saying it is our job and mandate. God has given them to us to contribute to them, to train and develop the next generation.
Wow.
And we have to pass the baton to them because they are the future of now, not just the future of later. So I think that's some of the intentional things you've also done in this journey, is just being very adamant, very clear, and you don't apologize about it. And I think our church has really grabbed a hold of that, and that's what's made this process even more so, more enjoyable and easier for the entire context of our people.
So good. Okay, so Nathan, 10 years in, what's it been like for you? I'm sure there's parts of it where you're going, okay, this is taking too long, this is too slow. And I'm sure there's other times you're like, this is too fast, slow down. So, what's it been like for you, and how have you maintained focus? 10 years, 10 years into a 15-year plan. How do you maintain focus on the plan? How's that going?
So I'll start off saying that where I am now, I did not see myself 10 years ago. Even before I went to college, it's part of my story. I thought I was going to be this school to be an architect, and that's what I was actually pursuing school for at first. I was going to a community college in our city. I'm going to work on my transfer to go to Texas A&M. I was working on that. To be an architect, I love buildings, I love structures. So I didn't see myself here. So I think that I say that to say, when I really finally let go of what I wanted versus what God wanted, he said, no, you had the idea right, but I didn't call you to be an architect of buildings. I called you to be an architect of people.
Wow.
And so I never saw myself or even told myself I want to be a lead pastor. I didn't say that. I just said, God, I'm willing, and wherever I'll go, wherever you tell me to go. I felt like Abraham, where he was like, okay, God, and he said, go to a land I'll show you. Well, it just happened to be Australia, and then the journey began for us. So for me, I didn't have a goal like I want to be lead pastor, so I'm fighting everything I can to be there. It was, I want to be where I am, and God, you'll show me what the next is. And so I've never fought for this. To be honest, I never wanted it. And maybe that's why God gave it to me. I don't know. So I say
that's kind of how God works the call, for sure.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it was just, I felt something, and there was a time when it really got real about 3 or 4 years ago, 4 years ago. I finally felt God call me, like, you're called to be a lead pastor. And I remember the feeling, because it was the same feeling I felt 5 or 6 years before when I was going to college. And there's a whole story about that, but I knew that I knew, but I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't have clear direction on, is it where I'm at? Because there was not a whole lot of clarity at that point. That we knew that there was a next gen, but the dynamic of my brother and I, he's 5.5 years older than me, different gifts, different talents, different abilities, but yet, what is this going to look like? And so I was like, okay, God, what are you saying? So I had to have a conversation with my parents, and I said, here's what I'm feeling, but I feel guilty. I feel this because I don't know if it's here, if it's somewhere else. I don't know. And now the conversations began, and I think maybe he was waiting. We haven't really said this yet, but maybe he was waiting on me to have that feeling or that drive or that call, and then conversations began. He knew that there needed to be a little more clarity, but he also knew that he needed me to let him know how I felt.
Yeah, Kelly, you can't call your sons or anyone in the ministry. They have to find that on their own. They have to know it and hear it.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
And I saw him struggling with it, but I couldn't fix the struggle. It's like the chick breaking out of that shell. I had to let him get to the place where he got uncomfortable.
Right.
And I sat on it for a year.
And you know what that's like. I mean, you've been in ministry long enough, but you get uncomfortable enough where you're like, I got to do something. Okay, now we can talk because you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so we did. And that's what I would say was when we shifted into the second 5-year space window of more clarity. And then I had to meet with our older son. This is really powerful.
Yes.
I had to meet with our older son and his wife, which his wife is one of our communicators. Okay?
Right.
So, and she spoke Sunday. Unbelievable message on Sunday. Absolutely. So that's my oldest son's wife. Well, I asked him the first question that had the two of them in the room with Janet, and I said, do you feel called to be a lead pastor? And he said, no. It took me a while to get to that point because I thought as the oldest son, I needed to be called.
Right.
But I don't feel called. I'm like, okay, that answers now we know where to go. We know what to do.
From the get out, the start, it was more of like, you're going to co-lead this together. That's really kind of how, this is where the little bit of confusion or not the clarity that we didn't have. So, but we didn't talk about that.
Right.
Nor did I talk to my brother about it. So there was this unknown, unheard, unsaid undertone, and we're trying to all figure this out, but no one's saying anything. But we know we all believe in each other. So this was a big tension.
It was a good tension though, Kelly.
It was.
Yeah. Well, that'd be. So what if he would have said yes? Yeah, I feel called, Dad, to be a lead pastor.
If it had said yes, the path would have been different. All right, is it here or is it somewhere else?
Right.
Right. Figure out, do we start another campus somewhere and you're going to lead that, or what do we have to create another plan?
Right.
The plan to be different.
Yeah.
But when Yeah, but we didn't have to do that.
Here's, I think, what was pivotal. When I came in to start in the very beginning 10 years ago, when I was leading youth, my brother was our youth worship leader, the worship pastor, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I came in as youth director, or youth pastor, if you will, and he, at that very beginning, and I was on the worship team too. I played drums. I was one of our main drummers. So there was a constant, like, he's leading worship and I'm the drummer that day, so I submit to him, but then it's Wednesday night and I'm leading youth and he's my worship leader, so he's submitting to me. So there was, God knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning. And we had some fallouts. Like, there was some heated conversations because we were young and immature, and we're both fighting for something.
Yeah.
Then years later, I mean, conversations that had, he was like, it's humility and all that kind of had to come into play for both of us, and strength came with all that as well. So it's been pretty amazing.
That's amazing. That's so good. So talk to us. I mean, there's a shift in the staff. I mean, when you transition, it's just not the transition between the two of you. And succession is not just about this. I mean, there's a shift in the staff and where they follow and who and when and where. And there's a shift in the congregation as well. So talk to us about some of those dynamics with the staff first. And let's I'm sure there's some tensions that created there too, or uncertainty.
It was uncertainty. So 10 years ago, I made the statement to our team, almost 10 years ago. I said, you got to be reproducing yourself. We got to raise up the next generation. They explained that a while ago. It's going to be messy, putting 18-year-olds in here, 20-year-olds in here. It's going to be, they're not mature. We know that. They have a limited experience, and we're going to have to train them and work with them. And some people couldn't handle it. They're like, well, why are we doing that? I'm like, because they're going to lead. 10 years from now changes everything. You're not going to, if you don't get with the program, you won't have a job in 10 years.
Right.
Your job is to not have a job. Your job is to create other leaders.
Right.
That's your job. Your job is to work yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
Some got on board with that. Some didn't. The ones that didn't are not here.
Right.
Not here anymore. There is one, I'll pick one person, won't call him by name, but there is one staff member who has been with me 20 years, and he has made himself valuable, and he's made the transition, and he became a confidant to Nathan and Kendall. But he's loyal to me. So you know what? He has a seat on the bus, because he knows if I'm going to go, I need to embrace this. And he didn't do it just because he had to. He did it because he wanted to.
Right.
And he's become a real strength on our team. He's kind of he's the oldest guy on staff. So he's in his mid-50s.
Obviously, other than you.
Other than me.
Yeah.
But he's the guy that's here every day. He's been around 20 years. He's got a real loving heart. And so he's just kind of the glue that loves everybody. And he's in our finance. He's our COO. My point is, you got to have the hard conversations. And there's some moving off of staff right now. There's some that moved off in the last year or two that have been with me a long time.
Mm.
They just couldn't make the transition. I'm like, I'm not going to be here. So I started putting them under him. Like, okay, you're going to serve under Nathan, and this is your job. You're going to answer to him. And some of them couldn't do it. They always wanted to come back to me. And
it's difficult on both sides because they were my leader, and I'm like, how does this work? Because I'm uncomfortable. And I don't know how to do this, and they're reporting to me, and so there was a lot of tension in conversations with all.
Yeah, but I think it's that doesn't surprise me, and I'm glad you guys are open and talking about that, because I mean that would be, I'm sure this pastor's going, how am I going to work this? But it's better to work it now than hand the baton off and then have a staff that now Nathan's having to wrestle with, and he's having to let people go, which creates uncertainty in the congregation.
So let's talk about the name change of our church. Our name wasn't always Skybreak.
Right.
When we moved in this new building 5 years ago, I chose to change the name of the church because we had this dialogue, just things like that. I didn't want him to come in. We were called Covenant Family Church for over 20 years.
Right.
And the word covenant is a great name and all that. It had a lot of
people couldn't say
equity here in town, but covenant is kind of an archaic word. Unless you're an attorney, you don't really use that word or know what it is. People don't know the covenants of God. Anyway,
I wasn't looking to change the name.
No, we weren't. So
nobody was.
But I said, let me do some of those things now. Let me take the brunt of that. Let me make the staff. Let me face the staff now. So this is what I would say as senior leader. I have owned that. It's not been easy, and I thank God for the staff He gave me for these 20 years. But you've got to think about the future, and you got to make these decisions. Don't just, Because if the baton gets dropped, I mean, the exchange zone is the most critical time in a relay. If it gets dropped or you go outside of that exchange zone, you're disqualified. It's over.
Wow.
Go look at the U.S. Olympic team in the years gone by when the Olympic team made some major faux pas, like 3 or 4 Olympics in a row. It's over.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I'm more concerned about, or you feel a passion in me, I'm sorry. I'm more concerned about trying to get it right, even if some people don't go along on the journey. That's their decision. I got to make sure we hand this off. I got 32 years here. I want the next 32 to be even better.
Yeah, that's so good. So talk about the congregation. When did you inform the congregation this is a plan? You know, their response. Yeah, all that.
So I've never publicly got up and said we're on a 15-year program. I've never said that.
Right.
I have just lived out the plan in front of them.
Right.
They're watching it unfold in front of them. And new people that are coming to the church now, they don't know any different anyway. They're just seeing Nathan speak. They do see Kendra speak. Kendra's over our women's ministry, which is not his wife. Now, she'll be the lead pastor's wife, but that's another dynamic of sister-in-laws.
Right.
That's been a whole nother thing we've worked through that has been a godsend. But there were a few hard. There's been bumps in the road, but thank God we've worked through them, and we can talk about that. That's probably a whole nother podcast. Yeah. So this would be longer than 20 or 30 minutes here. Yeah. But you know, they had to identify their lane and their giftings. So people have come into the church. One of our staff members now, they've been coming to our church a little over a year. She's now on staff. She said, I came for a month before I ever heard Pastor Danny speak. She
came when I spoke.
He spoke.
And then Kendra
spoke. And it was like 3 or 4 weeks before I spoke. But she was already a part of the church before she ever even heard me speak.
So how many Sundays a year right now, Pastor Danny, are you speaking?
So I'm doing 22 this year of 2019.
Okay, and Nathan, you're doing
20.
So that leaves 10 other, or more than that. Yeah, 10 other weekends. So Kendra's doing like 4 of those.
Yeah.
And we have a couple other guys that communicate that are really good speakers, and we mix them in too. Plus, if you have a guest, you know. So
wow, really cool. This has been so good, and we could talk for hours on this thing. There's so much in here, but what advice would you give to pastors about succession?
Gosh, Kelly, I think they have to. The first thing I'd say is start now. Start now. Figure. Even if you don't have a person, have a plan. Start creating what you think it should look like, even if you don't know who it is.
Right.
We happen to have blood and family, literal family, as Nathan being my son. A lot of pastors may not have a son. They may have a daughter and a son-in-law. Mm-hmm. Or dynamics may be completely different. They may not have children that are even in ministry, and that's okay. I get that. But they need somebody. What are you going to do when you're 65? I don't want to wait till I'm 65 and start trying to figure that out.
Right.
Then I'm beyond the curve of momentum. You lose the momentum, right?
Yeah.
I would just say start now. It's your job to train other leaders, and pastor, it's your job to find other leaders, and you're going to have to go find somebody, and you're going to have to be able to trust them, and they're going to be different than you, and they're going to do it different than you. But you got to. If you don't, there's going to be nobody.
Yeah.
So the lesser of the two evils, if you're going to look at it from that perspective, right? And be willing to share that. You just got to get uncomfortable. If you're not comfortable, you got to not let the pulpit be your identity. You got to get off that horse and be willing to share it and get somebody else in there. Otherwise, the church is just going to die when you're done.
Yeah, that's so good. Man, this has been so good. Thanks, guys, for doing this. Is there anything that I should have asked but didn't?
Well, I would say to your previous question about what would you tell pastors, I would also say the person who maybe feels God's call that's under someone in leadership, like in my position, in whatever context that may be in, I would just encourage you to submit yourself to that leader and just allow God to do things through him through you.
Right.
And just enjoy the journey. And the more it's kind of like the more you want it, the more you squeeze it, the more you're actually going to lose it, like a bar of soap in a shower, if you will.
Yep.
Allow God to take it. And one of the phrases we've always said is just hold your calling tight, but your position loose. And I think just being flexible. I think that's the versatility of knowing whether or not you can actually be a lead pastor. Is can you do some of these things? And it's not just can you do them, but are you just willing? So I would say have a spirit of unity. You don't have to agree to be in unity, but you can definitely still stay in a spirit of unity and just submit yourself. God will work it out in the time that He.
I think that's so good. I mean, it's obvious to me, and just in the conversation here, that the level of honor and respect between the two of you is it's beyond just saying, okay, father and son. But I mean, father and son can butt heads faster than anybody else too, right? So I mean, that's dynamic is not necessarily blood related, but there's a level of respect and trust and honor back and forth, and a level of communication that I think that is vital. So I think that's really good. That's active part of both. That's not just one or the other. That's an active part of both. So, man, this has been so good. I'm sure there's pastors, leaders listening. They're saying, man, I need more information. I need to hear more about this. So where can our listeners connect with you guys online?
Well, skybreakchurch.com is our website. We're in College Station, Texas, you can download the Skybreak app. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Danny H. Green. Facebook, Danny Green. That's anything. And so, and you go online. You can email us and all that as well. Nathan, where can they reach you?
Mine, Instagram and Twitter is just Nathan D. Green, and Facebook, obviously, Nathan Green. So
awesome.
There's a lot to talk about. Thank you. We don't have it right. I mean, we don't have it perfect, but we're trying to get it right. Let me say it that way.
No, it is amazing. I've never heard anything quite like it, and so I bravo to you guys for this journey, and it's exciting to watch, and it'll be exciting to watch for the next 5 years.
I'm excited too.
Yeah, it's very cool. Thanks so much, guys, for on the program, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Pastor Kelly. Love you guys.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation with Pastor Danny and Nathan. Man, so much in there. I think pastors and leaders, you got to go back and listen to this again.
Definitely.
Watch this again, because there is so much in here that they brought up that is amazing, that we need to think on, pray about, press into, because it's huge. What was your big takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, so many notes, but in this one where he talks about just the succession plan and talking about how it's not like the handoff doesn't happen when the leader starts to slow down, but it should happen when the leader's at full pace, and then those coming up behind should match pace.
So good. That's a relay race that happens in succession as well. I mean, too many people try to hand off when they're almost out of breath, or they're tired and they're slowed down, and then in order to that hand exchange to happen, then that who's taking the baton has to be at that pace too in order to have that exchange happen.
They try to hand it off too early.
Yeah, amazing. And what stood out to me was that Revelation, I never really paid attention to it before, but that scripture, Numbers 8:23, where it talks about the Levites that working from age 25 to age 50, and then they had to pass on the baton at age 50. I've never seen that before. That kind of stood out to me. I was like, wow, there's so much good stuff in here. And I encourage all of you pastors, again, man, think on this, pray about this, press into this. There's much that we need to learn or think about, talk about with our boards, with our staff in the whole area of succession. Man, again, GoCast has got
crazy content.
So much in here. So how do people connect with us?
Yeah, for sure. They can go to iTunes and subscribe to the GoCast network on the YouTube channel of GoCast, or they can go to the website at gocast.ca.
Yeah, and you can join the conversation with us on Facebook or on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you, have you participate in this conversation. We're on mission to create soul-winning churches, and whatever you're doing that is working, we'd love to hear from you. If there's questions you have, we'd love to hear those questions and dive into solutions with you on that. And man, next week, we have a great conversation with my friend, Pastor Dennis Vardy of Celebration Church in Edmonton, and here's a clip from that conversation.
For us, 18 years ago, somebody in our church had an antique car. They were part of a car club, and they just threw out the idea. They said, hey, I could get my friends to come here on Father's Day, and maybe we could, put some barbecue out and feed people and put on a car show. And, what dad wouldn't want to come on Father's Day to see some cars? And so that was literally how it started.
Wow.
Our first year we had like 30 vehicles, and that included a bicycle. I mean, that's that's what it was like. And we just kept that going. And what it has grown into today is the largest Father's Day event in our city.
Yeah.
Edmonton's known as the City of Festivals. This is the festival that we host. And this is one of the ways that we serve our city, provide for families, because there's no admission charged. The food is free. Registering your car is free. Literally, the whole thing is on complimentary. We do have some sponsors, but of course, Celebration Church is the major sponsor, and hundreds. It takes about 400 volunteers to run it now. And there's about 400 show cars that will be there and about 15,000 people that will traffic through.
All right. Can't wait for next episode with Pastor Dennis. Fascinating conversation you're not going to want to miss. Thank you again for joining us at GoCast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of GoCast. We hope you feel inspired and better equipped to take your community for Christ. Make sure to subscribe to receive each new episode as it's released. Let's go and break the stat together.